We continue to read literary masterpieces because they are works of imagination in which we discover the truth about ourselves and our interactions with others.
He says, Father, I am your son. You and your wisdom set my bearings for me. I obey you. No marriage could ever mean more to me than you, whatever good direction you may offer. So this is the fealty of a father to son. This is order. This is authority. And Creon congratulates him. Fine, Haemon, that's how you ought to feel within your heart, subordinate to your father's will in every way. Because, of course, if you do that, then insubordination, you have disorder, etc. There's no authority, no place to go. Oh, Haemon, he says, never lose your sense of judgment over a woman. There's another conflict in this play which is extraordinary. I counted 5 different times when Creon complains that my authority is being challenged by a woman, by a girl. And Haemon responds, Father, only the gods endow a man with reason. And I rejoice in your success, Father. Nothing more precious to be in the world, but what medal of honor brightens to his children than a father's growing glory, or a child's of his proud father. So there you have family order. No, don't, please, be quite so single-minded and self-involved. And he wants his father to pull back on this decree, not merely because he is betrothed to Antigone, but because there's a certain buzz about the wisdom or the rightness, the goodness of the decision. He says, oh, give way, relax your anger, change. And Creon responds, so, men at our age, we're to be lectured, are we, schooled by a boy his age? So you have a generational crisis. You have a generational crisis between father and son. You have a gender crisis because Creon doesn't want to be ruled or have his rule questioned by a woman. And look what happens between father and son. Creon, he says, is admiring rebels an achievement? Haemon, I have never suggested that you admire treason. Creon, oh, isn't that just the sickness that's attacked her? Remember, the treason is burying the enemy of the state. Haemon, the whole city of Thebes denies it. Not to a man, Creon. And is Thebes about to tell me how to rule? You see, they're using the same language. Now Thebes is an object of dispute. And also, paternal authority is an object of dispute. Creon, am I to rule this land for others or myself? Haemon, it's no city at all ruled by one man alone. And this is, we see at all times, there's this other crisis between the personal and the political. I'm not going to have a woman rule me. All the exchange of insults, it all gets very personal. Haemon, it's no city at all owned by one man alone. Creon, what? The city is the king's. That's the law. And he's right, of course. No king, no order. Haemon, what a splendid king you make of a desert island, and you alone. King, king, they're using the same language. It's simply tit for tat. We talk about violent retort. But a retort is a twist, and a retort is a retwist. So the idea of retort is the idea that it's blow for blow. It goes on like this. Creon, to the chorus. This boy, I do believe, is fighting on her side, the woman's side. I mean, you couldn't make this up. Haemon, if you are a woman, yes, my concern is all for you. Creon, why, you degenerate, bandying accusations, threatening me with justice, your own father? Haemon, I see my father offending justice. Wrong. So justice, justice, father, son, fathers, you're into. The law of violence is very simple. If we think the same thing, we'll agree. 2 and 2 are 4. If we desire the same thing that cannot be shared, like sovereignty, there will be conflict. So the law of violence is 1 + 1 = 1. You can't tell now the difference between Teiresias and Creon in that, verbal food fight, or between father and son here. Creon, wrong, to protect my royal rights. Haemon, protect your rights. You see, this verbal duel, this is the genius of Sophocles. To show this violent exchange only increases violence. The more violently people hold out for their position, violence only heats up. Because there's a law about that that says that contention will only, violence will only increase when contention becomes the content. Wrong, wrong, rule, rule. Protect your rights when you trample down the honors of the gods. Creon, you soul of corruption, rotten through, woman's accomplice. The whole accusation is there, corruption, pollution. Pollution means mixing good violence with bad violence. It means confusing the relationship between the political and the religious, between what is sacred and what is merely human. And that's what happens between them. You soul of corruption is rotten through, woman's accomplice. I mean, it doesn't get any nastier than that. Haemon, that may be, but you will never find me accomplice to the criminal. You see, because each is a criminal in their own, the other is the criminal in the eyes of each one. That hasn't changed. That's how we incriminate people. And that's how we differentiate between good violence, which protects the citizens, and bad violences, which threatens them. And this is what is disintegrating in this play. So Sophocles is extremely bold. And I think if the audience really understood what he was up to, they would have lynched him instead of giving him a prize.
Why?
Think
What
about
is
it.
he up to?
Well, what he's up to is showing that you don't have when you try to reconcile the religious and the political, and to re-coordinate the human with the divine, the danger is always that the humans will claim divine sanction for themselves. Not at the beginning, but when they're challenged. You have this offensive, defensive, and at a certain point, there's no offense. It's only defense and defense. Tort and retort, tit for tat. 1 + 1 = 1. And that's very dangerous for a culture to know. So he pulls his culture out of it by those final words on wisdom and fate and the will of the gods. But what he's describing is a cultural meltdown. And the cultural meltdown consists precisely in the riot or the riotous dispute between the religious and the political, rather than the fact is the political is supposed to find and ground its sanction in the religious. That's why we call it sanction. Right. You know, even our dollar bills, our currency says, "In God we trust." That's merely symbolic. But every culture has some God, some divine sanction for its organization. And here we are. Sophocles is dramatizing how cultures go into a meltdown, as we see all over the world. I mean, everywhere you look. It's not happening in every country. But the countries that make the news and the headlines in the newspapers are all involved into this friend-enemy confusion and into what is sacred and what is secular, what is holy, what is unholy, corruption, vile, etc.
So the play begins with a civil war, and basically a civil war in an attempt to reestablish order that ultimately fails. So
Yes.
the play is it's a failure of the political, of the religious order to solve the crisis of violence that is besieging the city. Say that in your own words.
Well, no, it's about the religious and the political, and about their inevitable competition, whereas in fact there should be a hierarchy. And what the play brings forward is that the central issue between the political and the religious is not the rites and the cutting up the innards and all these the rituals and prophecies and myth. The central issue is human violence. The central issue is human violence. So no violence takes place on the stage, but you have this verbal duel striding, throughout it. And that's as good. We haven't solved that problem ourselves. Why do we expect Sophocles to solve a problem that in 21st century America and elsewhere we haven't solved? What the play does is open up that can of worms and make us look at ourselves and maybe give us a caution at the very least to, you know, chill out, to keep cool. But we always say that about other people getting hot, and then we walk in and we get all hot and bothered as well. Human violence is simply unique to humans, and it's a problem that very clearly we haven't solved yet. And we have bigger guns and bigger wars and bigger bombs, and that hasn't made anybody safer. On the contrary, we're still a danger to ourselves and to our survival on the planet.
So what would you want to say sort of as a summary statement or a closing takeaway on the play about the major themes? Or
the takeaway of the play is to see us understand violence not as something having to do with a particular individual of any kind. Violence is a relation. And violence always increases when you have a challenge to the position or the ideas or the authority of anyone. And that the takeaway is actually, as I've said before, is that violence will only increase when contention, who's right, who's wrong, father, son, you, wrong, wrong, wrong. That violence will only increase when contention, struggle, becomes the content. Now the Greeks have a word for that too, the famous dictum of Heraclitus. He says violence is king and father of all. Some it makes kings, some it makes slaves. The play dramatizes that fact. Don't think that you can master violence with more violence. He says, as I sat on the ancient seat of augury, in the sanctuary, where every bird I know will hover at my hands, suddenly I heard it, a strange voice in the wing beats, unintelligible, barbaric, a mad scream. Talons flashing, ripping, they were killing each other. That much I knew. The murderous fury whirring on those wings made that much clear. So the birds are killing each other, the way the twin brothers were killing each other. This failed sacrifice, the birds are to be sacrificed, and then you examine their entrails and you understand what the God's will are or is. The fact is, we don't believe in that, but if you do believe it, you get unanimity. It almost doesn't matter. And here, the birds are behaving like a civil war. And he goes on to say, the prophet says, the rites failed that might have blazed the future with a sign. And it is you, your high resolve, that sets this plague on Thebes. Well, obviously, he's the king. And if their birds are indicating the gods are not in favor, who is you going to find responsible for this? Not the slave, not the merchant, nor the soldier, but the head man. The public altars and sacred hearts are fouled, one and all, by the birds and dogs with carrion. You see the symmetry, the parallel between the carrion of Dionysus rotting in the fields that his sister will give ritual burial to, and this situation. Teiresias says, just how much a sense of judgment, wisdom is the greatest gift we have. Now, obviously, that's what we pay prophets and oracles for, to be right about things. Creon, just as much I'd say it as a twisted mind is the worst affliction known. See, wisdom, twisted mind. Teiresias, you are the one who's sick, Creon, sick to death. Creon, I'm in no mood to trade insults with a seer. Teiresias, you have already calling my prophecies a lie. Creon, why not? You and the whole breed of seers are mad for money. So you have the crash of respect for religion at the very beginning, and there are 5 or 6 times in the play, Creon accuses the transgressors of his law as being money mad, as taking bribes. You see the fear in that culture, in any culture, you see money neutralizes relationships. And so it levels things. It reduces all values to exchange values. And he says to, Creon says, why not? You and the whole breed of seers are mad for money. Teiresias. And the whole race of tyrants lust for filthy gain. Teiresias is now been contaminated by the anger of Creon.